once the children are born, they start growing up. One of them likes to hunt. Which one is that? Esau. So Esau had the desire to be out and about and enjoy the things in nature, and even Dad enjoyed the results of him going out there, because he would bring home, what is that word that? Venison. And anyway, apparently he liked the taste of the spoils of his labor of going out hunting, and he enjoyed to have a pot of that. And then the other, Jacob, he enjoyed being at home. Help Mom around the house, tend to the garden, and to be focused on the life there. One day, I want to emphasize this story because one day Esau comes home and he's very hungry. And I started to ask a question, how many of y'all like lentil soup? Yeah. My sister-in-law, Becky's sister, she's living with us now. Anna is. And I fixed a pot of lentil soup. And she thought that was the greatest thing. And it wasn't. It was a few weeks later. She said, when are we having lentil soup again? And I like it very much. And apparently Esau did too. Enough to the point that he was, Jacob said, well, I'll give you some for your birthright. And so he said, sure, you can have it. Well, apparently he traded off his birthright for a bowl of soup. Look at the words here in verse, this is Genesis 25, verse 34. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Now in my King James Version, I've got a colon there. That means that there's a definite, not end of the story, but there's a definite end of thought. Because then the rest of verse 34 makes a statement here. Thus Esau despised what? His birthright. He despised it. Why would someone despise a birthright? You would think, now that just doesn't make sense, because our minds today probably are thinking of a birthright as being something that would be considered like an inheritance. Have you ever heard of somebody passing away and the family members argue over who gets what? And in fact, that's why you want to hurry up and ask, who's got the will so we can read it? Let's finalize who wants what, because let's get out Daddy's desires and let's see what he wants first, and then we'll go from there. We think of birthright a lot differently than they did. There was 2 sections to the birthright. I love doing this study. This was fun, okay? 2 sections to the birthright. One, of course, was an inheritance. A part of the inheritance was to gain a larger portion of what was owned by the family. A larger portion. And to say those words, it just hits me very clearly, that was the worldly side of the birthright. A lot of times that was more important, just like it is today. The stuff is more important than the other side of a birthright. See, the other side of a birthright is to... See, that's my notes today. That's not too bad. At least I got notes today. That's good. The other side of the birthright is the spiritual birthright. This was the difference between these 2 brothers. One focused on the worldly side, which included the works to take care of the worldly side, the actions and everything else to deal with stuff. He just was overwhelmed. He'd rather go hunting than deal with the workings of the family and the farm and everything. He didn't want to have to worry with all that. He'd rather go off and go hunting. That's why he hated the birthright. But the other side of the coin was a young man, Jacob, that focused on the spiritual side of the birthright. Now, his own mother helped him be reminded of this, grew him up, teaching him the spiritual side. And I know, just like me, to even talk this way, you're saying, no, wait a minute. Wasn't Mama the one that kind of helped him figure out a way to gain the birthright incorrectly? Let's admit it this morning. We all got issues. We all know the right and the wrong way to consider what we're being offered through Jesus Christ, right? If God's made a promise to he made an amazing promise to his grandfather. We were actually talking about this in Sabbath school class this morning. Abraham said, his mindset, that's why this verse becomes so important. Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. His vision was way down the road. That's why the spiritual side of the birthright became so beautiful. Jacob focused in future events, not in the here and now. Make me feel good now with a pot of soup type thinking. Jacob was down the road. So this is one of the characteristics of the true birthright. It was divided into two parts. One was the possession of father's wealth, but the other side is the spiritual birthright, which is what Jacob focused on. Part two. There was a second part to the birthright at that time. It was to commune with God, as did his grandfather Abraham did. This was his assurance. On behalf of the family, I have the privilege of communing with God on their behalf, which included to offer the sacrifice of atonement for the family. Is that huge or what? Absolutely. That's why you hear of these special forefathers down through history. They would settle into a certain place, and then they would do what? Built an altar, and they would name that place, a certain location. And so down through history, that's why the altars were built. They were on behalf of those carrying the birthright. Isn't that beautiful? I got to be honest with you, before I even finish my little list, I'm reading this little list that's found in my study, and I'm realizing as I'm reading the list, I'm praying in my mind, I want this attitude in these last days, because I am claiming the last birthright in me. It's time to go home, isn't it? And our visions should be beyond this world, just like Abraham of old. I got to admit something, and I shouldn't, but I can't help it. I went in the back room back here, and I was looking at the bulletin at the events, and there's the verse for today. And I'm thinking, where did that verse come from? And I said, that's not the right verse. And of course, she panics. But I said, I need you to read that verse, because it hit me. This was Abraham's focus, the one the covenant was made with. His focus was beyond, just as his grandson's focus was beyond. His own son got sidetracked because he was determined for Esau to have the covenant. He was determined that Esau had the covenant. Even though he despised the covenant and he knew it, he also showed his despising of the covenant by going off and marrying two wives of a heathen nation. So two things were slapping Isaac in the face, that his own eldest didn't really want it, but he was determined to do it just because he was born first. And we wonder why we have problems. Sometimes we're determined to do things our way, aren't we? And not really following by the word of the Lord, the direction there, the intent of the heart, the desires of the heart that are focused on Him. another point of the true birthright. To be the forefather of the chosen people of God and of the promised Messiah. I desire to be among the 144,000 that actually produce the revelation of Jesus Christ in them in these last days. If that's not the coming of our Lord, I don't know what is. It's much more for us today than, of course, anticipating Him coming in the clouds. But to be a part of this movement, to reflect Jesus to a dying world, what a high calling. Now that's claiming the last covenant, if there's anything. You know what I'm saying? That was one of the key things, which lead to inherit the immortal possessions embraced in the blessings of the covenant. The original covenant made to Abraham was that the seed would multiply beyond imagination. That's why there's a transition made in the book of Revelation between the 144,000 and that other group, the great multitude that you can't count. You know, it's like the sands of the sea. That's the promise. The original promise given to Abraham, you're not even going to be able to count. Are y'all desiring to be a part of this last covenant? I mean, I got so excited. I read that one paragraph over and over and over again this last few weeks. And it just inspired me to say, I can't shut up about this. Because here in the mind of Jacob, his mind was way down, way in the future, versus another brother that was self-centered. And, you know, I got to tell you like it is. I've just described the actions of our church. Now, I don't mean Crossville Seventh-day Adventist Church, because, you know, I'm just getting to know you. But I tell you what, it's sweet to be up here right now and see all familiar faces and friends that are here, even if you're visiting from Murfreesboro. Bless you, you know. Or my point is, it's really neat to see a lot of wonderful friends here. And I feel so comfortable to be here. Amen. But our church as a movement has gone through some tough times. Where is our greatest mistake is to forget how He has led in the past, right? So the original part of our movement, the foundational events that made us who we are, we should never put that aside. Anything that we're saying today or building our faith on today should be building on from our forefathers. So even though a message with great clarity was given to us, just like two brothers fought, determined to go their way. There was an amazing message given to this movement in 1888. It took this church 44 years to make some sense of the gospel, really. They had a lot of bits and pieces, but once you put it together with the righteousness of Christ or the life of Christ being manifested in us through the power of the Holy Spirit, I want to shout hallelujah just saying that. Amen. What an amazing plan to save us from this old world. And it took us a while, even though we weren't together as a movement, the right focus of how to make it down the road was presented. And that was Abraham's focus, to look down the road. We can get so wrapped up in thinking it needs to happen this way or that way. There's a reason why that angel told Ellen White, and at the last of her life, tell them, press together, press together, press together. Encourage each other to remind them of what we believe. what we trust in, where our faith is. In God and the fact that He sent His Son to save us. Was there turmoil? Boy, did Jacob ever have to go through some crazy stuff for those years, you know? But when he came back, even at the last, just before that uniting of him and his brother, I'm just curious. I could almost stand here preaching one sermon about these boys, these two boys, and stand over here telling the story about our church. You know what I'm saying? Jacob wrestled with Jesus all night long just before uniting for the last purpose of bringing families together. Are you hearing a last day message or what? We need to put our differences aside and allow Him to be our focus. Man, do we wish that there was certain things happen in church? We all do. There's different ways for ministry. I mean, I was fascinated. Here Jacob introduces his family to Esau, and he just yields it all. Everything's yours. But everything is a family. It's almost like he was, with the power of Jesus in him, the other history stuff just didn't matter. Just didn't matter. I have to tell a story. Another one. Years ago, I was the pastor not too far from here, and I almost wish somebody that I'm about to tell the story about was here, because I want to thank you for the experience, because I just don't know. But I had a phone call. A request was made from a mother and a father that their daughter lives down in Florida. She's coming home, and she wants to get married. And the young man she's getting married to is not of the church, believes in God, but doesn't know much about Adventists, Seventh-day Adventist. But the daughter was raised Seventh-day Adventist and wants a Seventh-day Adventist pastor to marry them. If not, they're on their way to the courthouse. I called the conference. I said, let me pray about this. So in the midst of my prayers, I called the conference. And I said, listen, this may be the best opportunity to share a witness of a good picture of Seventh-day Adventist, a good picture of the gospel at a wedding, and be much better than just turning them over to justice of the peace. Okay, and I got the okay. Come to find out, this family was a part of a group of families that had a little group getting together, and they had a name, and I'm sorry I will not get this correct. I just know that the name that they were calling themselves was the New Seventh-day Adventist Church. In other words, they had a title that had the word Seventh-day Adventist in it, and they had added a little bit. So in my call to the conference, I was telling them about this part of the story, and you can tell they freaked. Because that's a trademark. And to just take that trademark and do something else with it, that's just not supposed to be done. So it wasn't just okay to do a wedding. The lawyers were going to call me. So there's a lawyer that calls me, and he says, tell me about this again. Tell me the story. So I tell him the story. They can't do that. You got to tell them they can't do that. And they got to change their name. And he just rant and raved for a while. And I said, to be honest with you, they left the church back in the 60s because of a decision that the leadership of the General Conference made, and they were just not happy with the way the church is being run, and they left the church way back then. So if I go to them and tell them this story, it'll affirm them that they made the right move. Just like right now, there was silence on the line. And he said, I'll get back to you on this. So he gets back with me. And he said, I have a statement for you to share with this group. I said, okay, what's that? He said, would you tell them on behalf of Georgia Cumberland Conference that when they decide to join into or back into the sisterhood of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that we will be here ready, willing, and able to make that process as smooth as possible. I said, I can work with that. Beautiful little wedding. Made more friends. Put things that we were worried about aside and reveal the good news of that two can become one. May be quite different, but God's ministry in these last days, that's what He's all about, right? What an amazing calling we have to do that in these last days. It could be in Walmart, be at the beautician, no telling where. I love having those captive audiences for at least a few moments. But He's called us for such a time for this. And it's okay. I want you to hear this. It's okay to admit that we've all had problems. We've all had differences. But He's used us for such a time as this to unite under one flag, and that's His flag. Because Abraham of old looked beyond. Jacob looked beyond. Not just a cluster of cows or a piece of land. He looked beyond. So my challenge to you, with that vision, do you know that may be why His name was changed to Israel? I want to be a part of spiritual Israel today. His chosen people for this last days.